right, we're letting our attendees in. Welcome to Powerhouse Arena's virtual events. My name is Chris. I'm the events coordinator here, and we're very proud to be hosting the launch of Widowish by Melissa Gould. I'll share a link to buy a copy of the book in the chat. And Melissa will be in conversation with Robin Finn. If you have any questions, you can use the chat or the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and they'll take questions towards the end of the event. And I'll introduce our speakers now. Robin Finn is an award-winning writer, teacher, and coach, and the founder and creator of Heart, Soul, Pen, and Women's Writings Den. Her essays have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, BuzzFeed, and others. Robin has master's degrees in spiritual psychology and public health. Melissa Gould's essays have appeared in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, Huffington Post, BuzzFeed, and more. She's an award-winning screenwriter whose credits include Bill Nye, Party of Five, Beverly Hills 90210, and Lizzie McGuire. And she lives in Los Angeles, California. And I'll hand it over now.
Hi, Melissa.
Oh, hi, Robin. Thank you for that, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Melissa, I just want to say that I'm so excited to be here in conversation with you on this wonderful, moving book. And since you are one of my real life besties, I feel like we're always in conversation. But it's going to be really fun to have a conversation now and talk about your book.
I was going to say, how many times did we talk already today, Robin? Several.
A lot. I thought we should save some stuff for this conversation.
Okay.
But I'm really excited to talk about Widowish, and let me hold it up because I love the cover. And for those of you who don't own a copy yet, I just want to share that. So let's start, Melissa, by talking about the fact that we live in a fairly smallish neighborhood. And I was wondering, like, what would you say about writing a memoir? Like, you know, amongst your friends and your community?
Well, that's funny because I was joking, maybe even with you, Robin, that I feel like even though it's a memoir, remember the book, The Help? And at the end of the book, and that's a novel, obviously, and all of the ladies in town who the writer had written about were like reading about themselves and they were in shock. Like, oh my God. And it was like horrifying. It was like big news in the little small town in the South that like this woman had written about all these people. So yes, I include a lot of my life, which, you know, the entire story takes place in our neighborhood. And I do write about not just my close friends, but people who I came into contact with, you know, leading up to Joel getting sick, leading up to his death, and then certainly the aftermath and becoming the town widow, or what felt like the town widow. And, you know, the encounters I had with our neighbors and things people said to me, people who my daughter, you know, has been from preschool to at that point, middle school with. So I talk a lot about our little village and the people.
Well, and I know before you wrote Widowish, you had personal essays in the Huffington Post and other places. And I know you had recounted to me at sometimes that, you know, sharing something so personal, people feel like they know you. Right. And I just wondered what that was like for you as a memoirist.
I would just want to take a minute and say cheers because of COVID, we're doing this virtually online, which is fantastic. And I want to thank everybody for being here. So cheers. But if this were in the before times, we would be in a bookstore somewhere, we'd be hugging, there'd be champagne. So I just want to acknowledge that I appreciate that this is taking place in the midst of, this is what a book launch looks like in 2021 in the midst of COVID. So thank you everybody for being here. I appreciate it. And thank you for the interest in my story and in the book. And thank you, Robin and Powerhouse for hosting this. I meant to say that at the beginning.
I love that. Let's all say cheers. And if anyone has poured themselves something, we'll have a drink.
Okay, now what was your question?
Oh my God, really? You're going to ask me to remember what I said?
No, you said something about writing personal essays. Oh, and people think they know me.
Well, yes. Well, but let's hold that. Let's start. You know what I want you to talk about for a second is you're a screenwriter. He talked about your wonderful credits. Party of Five was one of my favorite shows back in the day that you wrote on. And so I want to first just talk a little bit about your writing journey and what that was like to be a screenwriter. And then, as I mentioned, I know you had personal essays just all over. And that was, I believe, and the beginning of Widowish. So I just want to talk for a second about like the journey, how that happened.
Okay, that's a great question. So yes, like you said, and like Chris mentioned, I was a screenwriter. That's how I've always made my living, as a writer. And when my husband died, and I'm not giving away a plot twist, the book is called Widowish, so we know my husband died, and he would have loved this so much, and I feel him with us. But as a screenwriter, I made make believe. And that's what's so funny about shows like Party of Five or any TV that, certainly people have been binge watching during this pandemic. And we all think we know these people. Even watching The Crown, we all think like, oh my God, look what Queen Elizabeth just did. And, but well, that's not a good example because they are real people. But Party of Five is make believe, most of what we watch on TV and dramas, it's made up stories. So that's what I was good at. And that's what I got paid to write for most of my adult life. So when Joel died, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but a friend of mine who I may or may not be in conversation with at the moment, invited me to join a writing group. And it was in the early days of my grief. And I just said yes. I said, okay, I'll go to the writing group. And it was really like a baby step in me finding a way back to myself in the depths of my sadness and in my grief. Writing, I realized, was such an integral part of who I am and my identity. And so that just joining the writing group in and of itself was healing and amazing. And I'm so glad that I did it. It was a wonderful group of people. I want to say after a session or two, and they were either 6 or 8 week sessions, I don't remember, but I had been working on a novel. Maybe Joel had been gone for 6 or 7 months. And a friend of mine.
Was it that soon? Was it really that soon?
Yeah, it was that soon. I'm trying to remember the timeline though, but what I'm trying to get to is a friend of mine suggested that I start writing about what I was going through personally. And this is in the book, but a friend had said something like, I love what you're writing in class, but your husband just died. You're raising Sophie on your own. I believe I had started dating Marcos at that time. And she said, you're dating somebody and you're not writing about any of it. I really think you should. And as a screenwriter, it never occurred to me to write about myself or to write about anything that I was going through personally. It was just never anything on my radar, nothing I had ever considered. And just the suggestion that this friend made had me rattled.
Okay, I just want to pause for a second and say, I remember when this friend made that suggestion. I remember where we were standing, and I guess I had this feeling that there was so much inside of you, and I wanted to offer the idea, like gently, that maybe you would want to consider it.
And that's how
do you remember that
phrased. It was
remember
like
that moment
say for in your very like spiritual universe way that I love. It was like, I just want to say, for your consideration, you might want to explore the idea of writing something personally.
Because I wanted to be so gentle, but I could feel the swirl. And I just wondered. And I remember talking to you about it. I don't remember your face, but maybe you were kind of like, I don't know. Were you?
I think I was like that for the entire following week. Like I was like, oh my God, it triggered something in me because clearly there was some truth to what you had said. It's possible that I may have come to that at some point. But you said it at a time where I was not expecting it. I wasn't even considering it. And I think because of that, I couldn't get it out of my head. The following week, so I carried that thought with me for the entire week. The next session, I showed up to class and I decided I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to write something personal. And so I did. And that was really the very beginning of these essays that you mentioned that I started writing. But once I started writing personally about this experience as a young widow and an only parent and what it felt like to be in our neighborhood, as we talked about, and having this experience, once I started writing about it, I couldn't stop. And it really was the most healing thing I could have done for myself. So thank you, Lee, Robin, for that suggestion, because to get to the point of this question is, yes, so part of my journey was I started writing these essays. And it was easier for me because it was so early in my grief. It was still, 6, 7, 8 months after Joel had died. And people would ask me, how are you? And how are you doing? And because I didn't want to stand there in Trader Joe's, pouring my heart out, I would just send people an essay. And that somehow got me connected with the Huffington Post. And then I had this column at the Huffington Post. And then I started pitching other outlets and I kept selling my essays. And so, I had an essay in the New York Times. But prior to that, I was in the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post. And I realized I did have a story to tell. I wasn't aware of it when I was writing the essays. I thought I would just tell my story in these essays and these little snippets. But what happened was when I was published in the New York Times, I wrote an essay about the last birthday gift that my husband had given me. And it talks about my love of Bravo TV and the Real Housewives. And
The Housewives. You love the Housewives. Yes.
And what I wanted was a Mazel sweatshirt, which I happen to have right here.
Let's see it. Oh.
Sometimes I'll be at Clooney and I'll be wearing the sweatshirt and people will be like, are you Melissa? And I'm like, how do you know? They're like, the Mazel sweatshirt. So Joel got me this sweatshirt because I asked.
I love this story. I love the story. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
By the way, it looks brand new still. It's 7 years old and it looks brand new. And I think there's some magic, some mazel in that. I don't know why I can't.
It does. It's gorgeous. So tell us the story about the sweatshirt.
Okay, so I asked Joel for this sweatshirt. He ordered it and it arrived while he was in a coma in the hospital. And it's his death and my birthday are just a few days apart. And I wanted this as a birthday gift. So he ordered it probably a month before it arrived because he was in a coma for 3 weeks. So got this, he was in the hospital. I came home one day. I didn't know he ordered it. I think he knows I received it, but it arrived while he was in a coma. And anyway, this is all the basis for this essay that I wrote that was in the New York Times. Because I mentioned Bravo TV in the essay, Andy Cohen, who everybody knows is, at the time was the head of Bravo and the founder of the Housewives and all of that. Andy read my essay on his Sirius XM radio show. And that was huge. And I didn't know that was coming, but I think that was the impetus for my realization that maybe I had a book in me. Because that happened at the end of 2017. I want to say. And I thought if Andy Cohen is so inspired by this story, yes, I mentioned him in it, maybe that was why, but he was so moved by this story that he talked about it. He was tweeting about it.
Didn't he read your essay on his podcast?
He read it on his radio show. And I thought, if Andy Cohen is interested and he's not married, he hasn't been widowed, maybe other people would be interested too. And then I spent the whole following year working on my book proposal. I figured out, how do you get a book? I knew TV, I knew scripts, I knew how to pitch, I knew how to sell a movie. I had no idea about books. That was a whole new world for me, but I educated myself and I wrote a proposal in 2018. I got an agent. And then I want to say we sold it in 2019. And then I spent all of 2019 writing it. And then I turned in my first draft almost a year ago to date. And so 2020, while yes, we were all indoors with COVID, my life in many ways wasn't that different because I was a writer. I always worked from home. So,
but I want to say, because I observed your writing process, and when you actually wrote the book, you made it look so effortless. After you got the book deal, I would talk to you and you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm on chapter 10, I'm 15, 20. I'm like, oh my God, it just seemed like it really did. It was the divine download. Like, do you feel like the book kind of just poured out of you?
I know
It
it's like
seemed that way to me.
we've talked about that, this idea of a divine download. Yeah, because it's funny. I have friends who have written books, and their workspace is like organized chaos. There's post-it notes, and there's bulletin boards, and there's tracking devices for all of their characters. And for me, it's like I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit on my couch, and I open my laptop, and I would start, writing, because it is a personal story. I certainly had notes and things like that I would refer to, but it was not an excruciating process. I was writing about some very excruciating feelings and obviously loss and upset. And there were some scenes that were particularly difficult to write and to get through. But in terms of like my process of writing, it really did feel like a divine download. It just felt like I was ready. I opened the computer, I was ready. Joel was with me. I just felt like I got it all out. And there was an order of things too, in terms of like the process you asked, Robin. There was very
Yes.
the beginning, middle, and end. The ending was, I wasn't sure actually when I was starting the book, and even my book proposal, when you do a very loose outline of what the book will look like, I wasn't quite sure where it would end. But ending it at the end of that first year of widowhood, I think I got to that part and I was like, oh, I think I'm done. Like, I think this is it. I think this is the ending. And
So
I
you
think
just
it
kind of had
worked.
an inner knowing that this was kind of the
Yeah.
arc.
I just try, I really trusted in the process. Again, I didn't know from books. And it's thrilling, I have to say, like, and here's my book. And it's thrilling, like, to have it out in the world. But it's also so bittersweet because here I am, an author, which was always an aspiration. I know many people dream of being TV writers and whatever, and that was a dream too. And I'm so glad that I had that experience. But I was always an avid reader as a young girl. I wanted to be an author. I always wanted to be a writer. And so the fact that I have a book out is thrilling. But the fact that it's about my loss and my grief is surreal. I think my life has not stopped being surreal since we walked into the hospital 7 years ago.
Well, it's interesting to hear about your journey, and there's so many things you said that I think resonate for so many people. But one thing I want to ask you is, you know, when you were in a writing group and you started to write and you were writing personally what was happening in your life, did you feel that it was therapeutic? Like, did you feel that being able to write about this was really helpful for you in this really intense grief process that you were going through, mourning Joel?
It was it was the most healing thing I could have done for myself. And that's what's interesting too about the fact that I then started pursuing this essay writing and sharing my essays, because honestly, it was very, I don't know if this is the right word, but in some ways it was very selfish, because I felt like this was just for me. I was writing for me. This was my healing. This was my experience with grief. This was my loss. I think that's why when Lee suggested that I start writing essays or start writing about what was going on for me personally, I felt like I don't want to share this. Like, this is mine. I was like very territorial over my grief. And I think
Yes.
so. I think like in letting it go and in sharing it publicly, it wasn't like it's like that's a bizarre thing, because when I start hearing from other widows and people who were experiencing a life change or experiencing grief in a different way, it was so surprising to me and so enlightening. And I couldn't believe that my story was resonating for people in a way that was helpful to them. Like, that was such a gift.
And I want to say something because I really want to reframe that idea of it being selfish, because you said that, and like I work with so many women who are writing who feel like, who's going to care about this? Or maybe that what you're saying is it's selfish. But I think writing is a courageous act. And to write your truth, what's really authentic for you, is a gift that you're giving other people. It's it's not for everyone, but for those who it is for, it's so powerful to be willing to share that. So I think that that actually it's all a head trip to think it's selfish. It's really a gift you offer other people, your own truth.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, I do think now that's what I have been doing, and certainly that's been my experience with Widowish. I mean, I could not be more, some earlier I think we talked about me people feeling like they know me, and the truth is I really am such a private person. Like I really am a very private person. So to share my story in this way was really yeah, not selfish, I guess. And I feel like it has been my privilege to share my story because just the way people have responded to it. And again, just that people find it resonant and helpful. And I mean, like I said, it's a tremendous gift. And I feel of service in a way through my writing, which I certainly never felt as a screenwriter.
I mean, I think that is such an incredible thing to share um, because it is truly in service. And I guess I just want to say that as your friend and fellow writer, that to be willing to share something that is deeply painful um, helps other people feel less alone. And you mentioned, Melissa, and I know it's true. And I actually read through a bunch of your wonderful, glowing Amazon reviews. And I think you have like 2,000. But I was reading some of them to prepare so I
Thank
could look
you.
prepared for our talk. And I was struck by how many people said, I'm not a widow. But I have had loss in my life. And this book was so meaningful, not to mention people who are widows or widowers and have lost their partner. And so I think it is always a gift to share so authentically. And I know that so many other people felt like you gave voice to so many feelings. If you're not a writer, maybe it's not so easy to get on paper, but you were able to give voice to so many feelings that people have.
Thank you so much. I have to say some of those reviews like get me, like I feel like they're so personal, so many of them, like, and people write me and they tell me their story.
Very personal.
And I just can't believe it. Like it's really, I mean, sometimes I copy and I paste and I send them to people like, can you look at this one and look at that one? And it's like, I just am blown away by people wanting to share that with me. And again, bearing witness to these things, I think is so important and allowing people.
Giving voice to it, Melissa, giving voice is something that, and I know you to be a private person, that something that is so private is so inspiring and uplifting for others. I love that it was inspiring and uplifting for you, particularly along your grief journey, but I also want to say it's inspiring and uplifting to others, not just that your story matters, which all of our stories do, but how deeply you touch people because you're writing about something really, truly tragic.
So tragic. I remember in the beginning, and I'm sure I said this to my agent and my editor at the time, and my early like beta readers, like, are people going to read past page, whatever page it was, 100? I'm making that up because it is deep. I mean, it's intense, but there is, and I'm so glad a lot of the reviews mentioned this too, that there is a lot of levity for such a sad subject matter. That it's a fairly quick and easy read. There are a lot of moments of levity at my own expense. but but no, it's just the whole thing, Robin, has just been it's just like I like everything just seems so surreal. Like I just can't believe it. It's the best thing. I mean, having a book in the world about this experience, and I've said this before, this to me is like what keeps Joel alive and present and close. And so the more people who
Yes.
read about him, and if there's 2,000 something reviews on Amazon, all those people read this, now they know my husband, so that's
Yes. And you said when we were talking earlier, I wrote down some notes. You said Joel was with me. And I know that you feel like sharing the story is a way also of really honoring Joel's memory. And I wondered, how that affected you, feeling, it sounds like from what you've shared with me, Melissa, that you feel closer to him, being able to share this story.
Wait, I just have to say there's a lot of noise in my house.
We don't hear it.
Okay.
Sounds pretty quiet. I don't hear anything.
Okay. The question was about Joel, feeling Joel with me.
Yeah, how the story, like you said as you were writing, Joel was with me, and I know you feel that sharing this story keeps him close to you. And I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about like how sharing the story of losing him helps you feel close to him.
I think that's exactly kind of what I just said, which is like there are more and more people now who know him and know about our life. And that's what keeps him close. Like I'm hearing from people who are saying things to me, like whether they're writing me privately or writing in a review, Joel sounds like a great husband. Joel sounds like such a great dad. Several of the reviews were like, I wish I knew Joel. So all of these things, even though these are strangers, I'll never meet these people. It's just keeping Joel's voice and memory alive. And in Judaism, we say when somebody dies, we say, may their memory be a blessing.
Yes.
I feel like all of this is a blessing. All of this is a memory of Joel and keeping him close. And again, I can't say it enough, just what a gift that is. And that's one of the things, just like shifting gears a little bit. When I did start dating Marcos, he spoke about Joel so freely and easily, whereas most people were nervous to bring him up. They didn't want to say Joel's name around me. They were, I could tell you it's not easy when, again, like we live in this neighborhood. Yes, it's Los Angeles, but it's a small town basically where we are. And I knew that people were nervous. I knew that people didn't know what to say. I knew people were well-intentioned, but their nervousness would get me nervous. It's just like this dance people do around grief. And what I appreciated about Marcos was he was so comfortable with who he is. He knew Joel. They knew each other before I really knew Marcos. And so that was so refreshing to be around somebody who had no issue with like talking about my husband. I love talking about Joel. I talk about Joel all the time. And that's how I keep him close and alive. Also, I mean, Sophie and I are always talking about Joel. But to talk about him with other people and to share him through this story, that has been just an amazing gift.
Well, let's talk about Marcos for a second. How does Marcos handle your connection and your continued connection to Joel, or just, the book coming out? I mean, I think a lot of people are interested in how you had this really loving marriage and now you're involved in this other really loving relationship, and how Marcos is doing. How is Marcos doing is my question.
We can ask him if he wants to join us. He's somewhere. Oh, I hear him running.
Marcos.
Everybody.
Is Marcos popping into this?
I think we have a special guest for everybody who's so curious.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Hi.
Hi, Marcos.
What's happening? What was the question?
Marcos, it takes a special kind of man, I think, to have the inner confidence, I guess, to accept that you're involved with someone who had a loving marriage and is also involved in a loving relationship with you. And I guess I was just wondering, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm great. I mean, as far as I thought I overheard you say something about how does Marcos flow with all of this, which is really a life flow. And basically, I was on these men's teams. It was men leaving a legacy, leaving their legacy through the betterment of humanity, families, and communities. And it was a really high discipline thing. I did that for about 10 years. And by the time I met Melissa, I was very comfortable around, men and our legacies and doing good things like that. So I knew Joel, and really all I'm doing is preserving the legacy of Joel. And he really showed up strong for Melissa and her daughter. And I just basically maintain the perimeter around the sanctity of that, if that's what if you will. And that's really why I'm at ease with that, because that was something I'd been trained to do. And I say trained because it's something that, I take pride in. There's skill to that, discipline.
For sure. For sure. And I think that it's really just a testament to your relationship that, you can have intimacy with someone and be connected to a foundation of love, even if that person is no longer here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to go that way. I'll see you guys.
Bye.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much,
Welcome.
Marcos.
You're welcome.
That's awesome. Thank you for having him join us. That's so fun.
I'm surprised
Melissa,
how quick it is. Yes.
one of the other things I wanted to be sure I didn't forget to say was I think in the book and certainly in your life, your friends, your girlfriends really feature so prominently in the book and the support that you have. And I know what a wonderful friend you are, and I'm a lucky enough person to receive that. But I wanted to give you a chance to talk about like the journey that you take in the book, Widowish, and how your friends kind of, figure into that journey.
I mean, I am so grateful for my friendships. And, I really have been blessed in my life with some of the best friends. Like my friendships were always important to me, always as even a young kid. And I think I just early on when we took, when Joel went into the hospital, he and I made that decision together. He was lucid and coherent, and we walked into the hospital together. And a few days later, he was in a coma. And it was in that very short amount of time that one of my friends, I clued in a few of my friends at the time, like Joel was in the hospital and I didn't know what was happening. And there was all this chaos and confusion. And one of my friends offered, just, what do you need? We're going to bring food to your house. We could pick up Sophie from school, whatever you need. And I typically would have just been like, no, it's fine. I got this. But I early on just kind of gave in and let my friends help. And that was crucial because it was like admitting, like, this is beyond me. I don't know what's going on. This is really scary. And I was open to receiving. And I think that was also part of my healing, that I let my friend, people want to help, and I think we're also, no, I'm fine. I got this. I'm good. But I realized, like I said early on, like I was going to need the help. And I think that helped me throughout my entire grief journey. I mean, I had a friend, one of my closest friends in Chicago, literally was calling me every day. She was like flying in to help. And my friends who were here, same. Like I remember coming home one day and it was a heavy duty day at the hospital. And a friend of mine, we kind of crossed paths. Like I just got home. She was unloading groceries. I didn't even know she had been to I didn't know that she was even in my house. She was unloading groceries. She just kind of gave me a hug and kept going. Like she knew, like that was enough. That was what I needed in that moment. Another day came home, there were flowers everywhere. Like people were just so thoughtful. And again, I opened myself up to receive all of that. And that was so crucial.
I love what you're saying about opening to receive. That's so beautiful. Your friends want to help you. I think sometimes when someone close to you suffers a loss, you don't know what to do. Like you don't know, should you offer, or sometimes you offer and people say no. So I think it's really beautiful. You said, I gave in.
I did.
So I mean, I love that. You gave in and you just let your friends carry you. You needed it.
Yeah. Because I recognized I needed it. Like things seemed pretty dire, pretty fast. And I think this was like, I was in, and I knew I wanted to be strong for Sophie. So I didn't want to be preoccupied with, what am I making for dinner or how I'm getting from point A to point B. Like I let people help, and it was just great. And I do have the best friends, including you. And speaking of the best friends, and this being the month of February, I remember that first year Joel died in November. And that first year, Valentine's Day, a few of my friends, again, one I may or may not be in conversation with at the moment, left Sophie and I little gifts. I remember opening the front door on Valentine's Day and there was like candy and teddy bears and I think balloons. And it was so thoughtful. Like it never, you know, I hate to say it. I don't think that would have occurred to me if it was somebody else. I don't know that I would be like quick to bring Valentine's Day treats to a recently bereaved friend of mine. But like it was the things like that that were so helpful.
Well, I noticed as I read the book how powerfully your friends figured into this journey, and I just wanted to point that out because I think that that says so much about just being a woman, you know, and being a person and needing help and being open to receive. So I really love what you shared, and I do remember that Valentine's Day. I didn't mention that my daughter is best friends with your daughter,
Right.
and I remember picking out stuff because we kept thinking that Joel was gone, and we didn't want you to wake up on Valentine's Day without a Valentine.
So thoughtful, so loving, and to
So I
this day, like still memorable, you know?
Yes, and I love how much in Widowish we see it's like it takes a village to get you, our main character, through this journey.
It really did. And I feel like it continues to. You know, we talked about Robin, or we have, you know, I say I'm an only parent. Sophie is an only
Yes.
child. And I became an only parent. And Joel was a very active and engaged father. He was not like a weekend kind of dad. I mean, you know, the way our lives were, his office was around the corner from our house. So frequently he would leave work, pick Sophia from school, come home with her, and then go back to work. Like he wanted to be there for her. He wanted to be a big part of her everyday life. And he was. So losing him, we felt it. I mean, anybody's going to feel the loss of a parent, but it was like, you know, I felt this weight of responsibility immediately. And I wanted, Sophie really just was my focus. Like I was determined to keep her on track, to keep her, you know, managing her life. I couldn't put myself in her shoes to be 13 and lose a parent. I mean, it's so sad. my
Yes.
my grief is sad also, to be a widow in your 40s, but really as a kid to lose a parent, like I just zoom laser focused on her. And so my friends were there for that too. Like just every thought, every should I do this, should I do that, you know, Joel wasn't there to discuss it with, so I was so happy to have my friends.
Yes, and because you were still navigating the high school years.
All the teen years, like you know, they say like
Yes.
anger is one of the stages of grief or whatever, but it's like I got so mad, like Joel, this had to happen now, like she's 13. I have like a
Yes,
teenage
like the
daughter, you
teen
know?
years are terrible for an intact couple, let
Yeah.
alone having some kind of loss. Yes. The teen years are just no picnic.
Oh my God.
So,
Yeah.
well, Melissa, I do have some questions that have arisen.
Yeah.
I
I
want
want
to
to like
just
look
take
in
a
the
minute.
chat. I see the chats are going.
Okay, well, I want to say that one person in the chat who his name will not be mentioned wants to know if you ever washed the Mazel sweatshirt. They feel it's very suspicious what it looks like, and they want to know if it's been washed.
That is
So
hilarious.
can you please answer
It's
that?
watched a million times. It's 7 years old, but isn't it magical? Like it's really the fact that it looks as great as it does.
Okay, another question that I thought was so interesting is someone said about their organized chaos, about their writing space. And you talked about, so when you were writing Widowish and you were making your way through this book, you didn't have post-it notes and a giant outline on poster board. You know, tell us just something about your process.
Well, like I said, I really just was in the headspace. You know, again, being a writer my whole adult life, writing was not something that was intimidating to me. And I realize it is to many people. And Robin, I mean,
Yes.
you teach these wonderful classes, and I know for so many people, the blank page is like this frightening thing. For me, it's like, that's my job. I go in. So I had no problem with like the discipline around writing and telling my story. And I think because in my book proposal, which is the tool you use to sell a nonfiction book, a memoir, I had a very loose sketch of an outline of what the book would be. And I just kind of would open that and I'd kind of keep that on the side of my screen. And that would trigger like, oh, right, I wanted to tell that story, or, oh, that's right, because so much was put into that proposal that really ended up being such a great tool for me to use. I always kind of
Yes.
don't like writing from an outline, but in this case, that was it. I did not have the post-it notes. I mean, I do have books and journals and things from that time when Joel was in the hospital, for sure. And that was also so helpful. But my process was really like I kept my hours. I was disciplined. I tried to open my computer, I think by 11 every day. And I would write until around 5. And I did that for months. It just was
So
like,
what I'm hearing you say about in terms of your organization is that because you wrote a book proposal and you had to outline roughly your book, that really helped you. You were not one of these people who had to build some kind of, giant poster board. That wasn't your style.
no, not at all.
Not at all.
No.
And another really interesting question that we have gotten is that coming from screenwriting and going into the world of nonfiction writing and really memoir writing, they're asking, what helped you navigate the process of writing a book proposal or getting a book published? So I had a question already written down that was sort of like advice for writers. Like, is there anything you would just say, Melissa, to people who are feeling inspired to maybe want to consider writing a memoir or personal essays? Is there any advice you would give about that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's not like just to go back to the beginning of the question about screenwriting, like, it's not like I decided to become a screenwriter and poof, I became a screenwriter. Like, I had to figure that out. That was like, I didn't know what a spec script was. Well, a spec script is a sample script you write, either something original or for an existing show. And that is what you use to get either an agent representation or to get on a show. They will, like, for example, I got on Party of Five because I wrote a spec script for a show called My So-Called Life, which was huge at the time. So it was perfect. It was a perfect sample for a show like Party of Five. But like, I didn't know, I wouldn't give Party of Five like a spec CSI, because that's just a different
Yes.
writing style. So similar to the book world, it's a whole system you have to navigate, so I figured it out. Like, oh, what's a book proposal? I didn't know what a book proposal was. So I
Right.
got books on how do you write a nonfiction and what is a memoir versus an autobiography. So I guess my advice would be, if you're really serious about pursuing, I mean, essays is a whole other conversation we can talk about. But in terms of an actual book, you kind of have to figure it out. There are so many classes people can take. I did not take any of those classes. I maybe took a couple seminars here and there, but I didn't take a class. But I think I bought a book, and I had friends who had written, novels and proposals. And so I knew enough people to kind of help me with this endeavor of writing a book. But it really is like anything you want to pursue, if you're serious about it, you figure it out. And I figured out, okay, this is a book proposal. This is what I'm going to need to get an agent. And then I figured out like which agents and what their requirements were. It's a whole step by step. And I have to say this, I was afforded the luxury of time. I did not feel like if I don't get this done by, a certain date, then I just really gave myself the time and space and energy I needed to figure it all out so that I could do it in a way that made sense. And again, because the subject matter is so personal, in a way that I
Yes.
can take, it's like small steps. That's what worked for me. But yes, it really just educate yourself on what it is, what your goal is, and then kind of go after it. That worked for me. That was my methodology.
Well, I think this is a good time to segue into the Q&A because we have a lot of interesting questions. And
Okay.
so I just want to say that anyone who's listening, if you use the Q&A feature, or you can put them in the chat either way, because I'm actually looking at both. If you have questions for Melissa, I'd be happy to ask her. You have some really wonderful questions. One person is asking Melissa that I had mentioned how a lot of reviews mentioned that people who weren't widows were really deeply identifying with your story, which is true. And they're saying, what do you think it is about your story or the way you wrote your story that resonates with people who've lost someone as close as a husband or a father, or just a close person, or just a person going through loss, but maybe not being widowed? That's the question. What do you think it is about widowish that reaches other people?
I have to say, and again, it's such a gift because I have heard from so many people for whom the story resonates. And I think it is just the way that I write. I think I write in a way that's very conversational. So many people, and this always makes me smile, say they wish they were my friend, or they thought they knew me, that they think that we're best friends. And I just love that because, and it's not like I'm aware of it, by the way. It's not like I'm sitting here like, oh, I'm going to write and everybody's going to think they're my friend. I'm just writing. It is just my tone, I guess, I guess I have a casual way of relating or relaying and writing a story. And even though it's a heavy story, it feels conversational. And I think that's why people have responded that way, I think.
Well, I would also say, as someone who has written with you and who has written and has read your book, that you are a very honest and brave writer. And I think that that cannot be, uh, it can't be faked.
Mm.
Your book, and you write the truth as it is for you. And that kind of honesty is so deeply resonant for people. And I guess my question is,
Thank
do
you.
you feel like it's hard to be that honest? Because I think your work is honest and brave.
That is so sweet. And I so appreciate you saying that. I don't know how to write in a way that isn't this. You know what I mean? Like I don't it if yes, it's honest because it's the truth of my story. And I think I tell the story very just I'm not like a flowery writer with a ton of like adjectives. And I kind of, like I said, I write the way I talk. And I guess there is an honesty in that. Um,
And honesty resonates because I
yeah,
think
that's
we
true.
all want to see we all want to see truth, because
That's what
everything's so
like
curated.
Marcos, one of his lines, which I think is like he's a blues musician. And I think one of the blues players says like, you can't fake the funk. And I think that's so true. Like,
I've heard Marco say that.
I'm sure you have, if anybody's had a conversation with him. So, but there's something about that. Like, I'm not faking anything. Like, this is my story. This is the truth. This is what happened. I tried to be respectful. That was, we haven't talked about that, but because I do talk about Joel's family in the book, obviously I talk about our daughter, Sophie, but I really try to be respectful because I'm the one who chose to tell this story. And I didn't want to impose my version of events on the way that Sophie may have been feeling or Joel's dad may have been feeling. So I tried to be very, what's the word? Like honest, yes, but I tried
Well,
to
you're
tell,
telling your story. You're not speaking in this book for
right,
other people. It's your story.
right. And so when I was including some intense scenes with other people, I really just tried to say it plainly. Like, this is what happened. This is what I saw. This is what I observed. Um, and it's remarkable that that I was able to do that in a way that everybody involved has really appreciated. That I did I said what was happening, and they were all okay with it. I guess is what I mean.
Well, this is a good segue into a question that I see a couple that are sort of around this theme of, can you share? I love this question. Can you share how to get comfortable with being so exposed? I think that's such a particular question for someone who's written a memoir. It's a different question if you'd written a novel. This is a
Yeah.
memoir. So that's what they're wondering is, do you have any tips? With, well,
You know,
I'm gonna go ahead.
this is I don't think if I really consciously felt like, oh my God, I'm walking around naked and everybody's going to see me like exposed in that way, I don't think I would have done it. Like, I think I just kept the truth of the storytelling as my focus. Like I just did not veer from the actual events that took place. So I don't look at it like I was so exposed. I mean, I didn't frame it that way. I think if I framed it that way, I probably never would have written this.
Yes. So you really, and I think, do you think that perhaps because you were a trained screenwriter, you were able to kind of put that hat on and just focus on writing and not think about exposure?
Probably, yeah. I never thought about the results. Even now, if I post an essay, and I wrote a few essays last year leading up to this book launch, but I'm never thinking like, what are people going to think? And what are people going to say? And that's why I think reading the reviews is so thrilling, because I'm seeing what people are thinking and how they're responding, but it's not something I worry about consciously or even really consider as I'm writing something. I'm just writing for the sake of writing. It's been very healing for me and I enjoy it. I actually enjoy what I do. I enjoy writing. It's a thrill for me that I'm a writer. That's again what's so strange about having a book. It's like I feel like it is such a joy to do what I love to do, and have that as my
I
career.
love that you're saying that. I love that you're saying that because I know it's a joy for you. And I think that's a beautiful thing even to share with other people who are asking questions and focusing on your joy. And like you had talked about the relief or healing it gave you, as opposed to focusing on what other people are going to think.
Yeah. It's I can't go into it with the expectation or the outcome. I just dive in, which again, I know is
I
difficult.
can't,
I know that's
I
hard.
just want to
for
repeat that.
people.
I love that. I can't go into it with the expectation or the outcome. I'm quoting you because I
Okay.
think that's really, because I think going into it with the expectation, the outcome is a really way never to go into it. So I
No,
love that you're
right.
saying,
And Robin, and you talk about that in the gremlins and this and that, like that's inviting your gremlins in, isn't it? To say like, do you want to explain what a gremlin is?
well, I mean, just as we're talking about writing together and hearing negative voices, the voices that say all those things to writers and other creative people about how you don't matter and who's going to care about this. And I always admired so much in my working with you, Melissa, that you were very able to just single-mindedly focus on writing and not entertain that so much, which for many writers can be paralyzing.
I agree. And I think that maybe does have to do with, listen, when you're writing scripts for Hollywood, there's, 6,000 people behind you waiting for your job. They're all capable. They're all talented. They can all do the same thing. And so you're constantly walking on eggshells in a nervous wreck and feel like you're completely disposable. And it's a horrible way to spend your time and energy. And that's really like the downside for me of working in television was that the actual writing and the script is such a small part of the job. And it was the part that brought me the most joy, but it was the part you spend the least time doing. And so writing an essay or writing a book like this is just, it's like an exhale. It's like such a relief. And I
Yes,
enjoyed it.
I
I'm
love
reading
that.
some of
And
the
I just,
comments. I'm sorry.
and I just love your connection with writing and feeling joy. Okay, one question that has come up several times, and a lot of people who are listening want to know, Melissa, and I wrote this on my Melissa question list, is what is next for you? They want to know, when's your next book coming? What's happening next? So what is next for you, Melissa?
I love that question, and I wish I had an answer, and I just don't know. I mean, I'm still writing. I have things I'm working on now. I don't know what is going to unfold fully, and I just don't know yet. But I don't know if I'm doing another memoir. I may go, the novel that I started writing in the throes of my grief, I really love that. I may go back to that. We'll see. Follow me on Instagram.
You'll keep us posted.
Yeah,
You'll keep us
everybody
posted.
to follow me on Instagram because that's really where I post like my latest and greatest. So my Instagram is Melissa Gould _author. If you're not already following me there, but that's where I really like update everybody with like what I'm up to, what I'm doing. If I posted an essay or
Melissa Gould _author on Instagram. So we can, if you want to know what's going to happen next, because a lot of people want to know. So Melissa Gould _author on Instagram.
or my
Okay,
website, widowish.com is also a place people
or
can.
widowish.com. Another question you're getting is, do you have any advice for newly widowed people? Or the question was really newly widowed parents. Is there anything that you'd want to share for people who are going through this experience?
Yes. So for newly widowed parents, and even anybody who's newly widowed, and this is in the book I write about how a friend of mine who probably has no idea that she even said this to me and no idea how resonant it was, but she said basically, keep things easy. Your husband just died. You will never go through anything as difficult as that again. So every choice, every step you take, everything you do, choose easy. That was life-saving for me because I tend to overthink everything. I question everything. I have to talk the same thing out over and over and over. So giving her saying that really just gave me permission to do my best at keeping things easy, which is the
Yes.
next thing, which is doing my best. And I think we all there's no one way to grieve. So we all do the
Yes.
best we can. Like it's hard. Sometimes I would drive Sophie to school and I would get back home and I'd stay in bed the whole day until I had to go pick her up. And it was for that day, that was the best that I could do. And I
And just
tried
being
not-
gentle with yourself.
yeah, just try not to beat yourself up. I mean, it is, when you're widowed young or you're widowed at midlife, you're not prepared for it. You don't have friends in that category. Like you kind of don't know what to make of it. You don't know what to do with yourself. It's a really sad and shocking time. And that's whether you lose your person like that, like, they give you a kiss in the morning and leave for work and something happens and they die, or you're watching them die through a horrible illness, or, there's so many variables that people experience, but really just to be kind to yourself, choose easy and you're doing the
Choose
best you can and know that you're just doing the best that you can.
I love that. Choose easy. That's beautiful. And I remember you telling me that a friend gave you that advice and how it helped you so much.
So much.
Melissa, we have one more juicy question I want to get to, which
Okay.
is, would you be open to sharing what your daughter thinks of Widowish? That was a question that I thought was interesting.
Great question. I
Would
wish
you?
she was here to answer. She loves it. She thinks, I think for her, it's exciting to have this book in the world. I mean, Sophie's experience is her experience. Like that was something, all of my scenes with Sophie in the book, like I said, I really in some ways were the hardest to write because I took the most care in writing those scenes because I didn't want to, again, sort of usurp her experience or project what her experience was. So I really tried to be neutral in those moments with her in the book. But I think she loves it. I think she's proud of her mom and she likes being the focus of that kind of attention in the world. And I think she likes it.
Do you feel like she also feels like it keeps her dad close?
Oh, that's such a good question. It probably does. Probably does. Or she probably does feel that way, I should say. Yeah.
Well, she's not
also
here for
a
us
very
to
private
ask, but
person, like she also is very
yes.
holds things close to the vest, keeps things in. But she probably does feel that it keeps Joel close.
I think we maybe have time for one more question. And I have this wonderful question. Can you discuss how being in a writing community influenced your writing journey?
Oh my God.
Did it influence your journey being in a community of people or
Well, you know what
not?
it did? And this happened like day one of the first class. This was like shocking to me and this is just what writing groups do. You spend your time writing and then everybody goes around and reads what they just wrote. And I was like, what? I have to read this now? Like I couldn't believe it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I thought that was like, but I just wrote it. Like, how am I supposed to read this now? So in that way, in that moment, I just sort of let go of all the gremlins and all the negative talk and all the like, this is bad. There's not even a complete sentence in this, or that makes no sense. Or all of those thoughts you have, because to read it out, I mean, there's real vulnerability in that, sharing what you just wrote, whether it's an essay or a poem or a short story or fiction, whatever, to immediately read it 2 minutes after you just wrote it, like that was shocking to me. So that really,
And a lot of people find that terrifying.
it was terrifying for me. It continues to be. I am still in a writing group, and there are times, when we go around and I'm like, I'm not, but in my writing group, which I love, no, you can't preface your reading with anything negative. So I appreciate that. You just have to dive in, you just read it. And that really has helped me tremendously.
Wow. That's beautiful. I guess there's so many wonderful quote comments. I guess my last question for you, Melissa, would be, do you feel that writing this book has changed you in any way? At the end of this process, now that we're sitting here together, do you feel like you're a different person than you were before, or?
I wish I could say yes. I feel completely like
I'm liberated.
I'm sure I have changed in some ways, but I'm not sure. I really am not sure. I know that I feel joy in having this book out in the world. And I know that it has changed me to hear from so many people that the story resonates for them in some way. So I'm just so happy. I'm just so happy to have had this experience writing this book, the experience of the reception with which it has been met in the world has been incredible. And I'm just really grateful for all of it.
Well, I'm so grateful that I could be here to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled. I think we're
It was,
wrapping it up.
I
Yeah,
think
there's
so. I
questions.
wanted to stay on time.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you so much to Melissa and Robin and Marcos and everyone who asked questions and hung out in chat. And you can buy a copy from Powerhouse if you haven't yet. And if you missed any of the event for any reason, we'll have it on YouTube very soon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, everybody, for showing
Thank
up.
you. Thank you so much for having
Robin,
me
thank
here.
you.
It was so
Robin.
wonderful to hear in depth about the book, Melissa. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you so much, Robin.